Thank you for joining us for this World Elder Abuse Awareness Day event. We welcome you and we look forward to learning with you today about this important topic. I'm Patricia Henderson, Outreach and Community Services Manager at Senior Connection Center. The program today is a collaboration by the 11 area agencies on aging throughout the state of Florida with the support of the Department of Elder Affairs. Thank you for joining us today for Be Informed, How to Spot, Report, and Prevent Elder Abuse. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was launched June 15, 2006, and provides an opportunity to raise awareness about the issue of elder abuse. Today, we have two presenters who will inform us on the topics of elder abuse and how to be a savvy consumer. Each speaker will have about 30 minutes, and at the end of the program, we'll have a time for Q&A. During the presentations, please put your questions in the chat. Now, April Ryan will introduce our first presenter.
Good morning. My name is April Ryan. I am with Advantage Aging Solutions in PSA 2. I have the pleasure of introducing Nikki Cole. Nikki has been a state employee in Florida for 15 years, working with the Department of Children and Families Abuse Hotline since 2011, where she is currently serves as the Abuse Hotline Training Supervisor. Her team provides community trainings, in-service trainings, and pre-service trainings to new hires. She has moderated and trained several live and virtual presentations to thousands of participants across the state of Florida. She previously held the position of an abuse hotline trainer and an abuse hotline counselor at the hotline. Nikki relocated to Florida in 2005 and graduated from FAMU with a Master's of Science in Community Psychology. While in graduate school, Nikki completed her internship at 211 Big Bane and afterwards joined the staff as a crisis hotline counselor. She is also a graduate of Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, where she studied psychology and business and earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Management. Nikki was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. She enjoys attending conferences, concerts, festivals, traveling, and the performing arts. Thank you, Nikki, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, everyone. Like April said, my name is Nikki Cole, and I'm with the Florida Abuse Hotline. I have a lot of information to share with you today. I primarily am going to speak about professional mandated reporting as it relates to elders and vulnerable adults. The purpose of this training is to share with you the role of the Florida Abuse Hotline, your role as a reporter of abuse or neglect, review the adult reporting guidelines. We're going to define for you elder abuse, vulnerable adult abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And then we're going to share about the reporting process. So we're going to explore that process, the different ways that you can report abuse and neglect, and some new things that we've added to the hotline to make it easier to report abuse or neglect. As a reporter, who is a reporter? How many of you know that in the state of Florida, everyone is considered a mandated reporter? Show of hands. How many of you know that you are a mandated reporter just by being a citizen of Florida? Quite a few hands, absolutely. So, any person who has knowledge of or suspects abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a child or vulnerable adult is required to report in the state of Florida. House Bill 1355 made revisions to Florida Statute Chapter 39 that says any person who knows or has reasonable cause to suspect that a person is being abused is required to report such knowledge to the department. That does include elders and vulnerable adults. Now, some people are, because of their job, their profession, they are considered professional mandated reporters. So, those of us who work particularly on behalf of elders, on behalf of vulnerable adults, on behalf of children, are considered professional mandated reporters, which basically means that because of our job, our employment, we are required by law to report and provide our name to the hotline. Okay, so that includes all types of staff, advocates, right? Power of attorneys, bank employees, court personnel, hospital staff, mental health staff, counselors, law enforcement, medical staff, adult care staff, right? Including adult day care staff, those who work for in home services, those who advocate on behalf of elders and vulnerable adults are all considered professional mandated reporters. Okay, which basically means that you're required by law to report to the hotline and you're required to give your name. Now, what do you need as a reporter? What information do you need to actually call in to the hotline? What information do you need to report? How many of you feel, by a show of hands, that the allegation is the most important thing to report? That you need an allegation of abuse or neglect or exploitation? Absolutely. How many of you think a means to locate, so how to locate the vulnerable adult or the elder, is most important? By a show of hands. A few more hands. Awesome. How many of you believe that the names of the adults that are involved, or the people that are involved, are the most important to have to be able to give that investigative staff? And show of hands, how many of you believe sources or people who are able to speak to the investigator and share what they know about the situation, those are the most important uh, people to give to the investigator? How many of you just said all of it is important? Okay, so an allegation is one of the most important things to provide to the hotline when it comes to concerns of abuse or neglect. The actual allegation, they are all important, but an allegation, we need an allegation or concern of harm or maltreatment. So we need an allegation. We need a means to locate, because the investigator needs to be able to go out and find, right, the elder, the vulnerable adult, the people involved. So that's very important as well, right? They cannot go out and just start looking for people. We need a way to contact those people. They're not private investigators, right? They're protective investigators. So we do need a way for them to locate the actual person of concern. We also need their names and demographics if you have them, because that makes it easier for the investigator to locate them and to know who they're looking for. So that's important, but it's not necessary. So we want you to know that if you do not have their names, their demographics can be very important, like, their gender, their age, places that they frequent. Those can be important indicators if you don't have their name, date of birth, social security number. So demographics are important if you do not have names, but names are not required, but they are helpful. And of course, last but not least, sources are important as well, because they give um, the investigator someone to go back and uh, speak with, ask questions. They can reconcile any information that may be misconstrued or any information that is unclear. So it is important to have sources, but again, not necessary. The primary thing that we need is an allegation. We need reasonable cause to suspect harm. Okay, reasonable cause to suspect that a vulnerable adult or an elder is being harmed. Now, what happens if you don't report abuse? Any person who is required to report knowing and willfully and fails to do so or encourages another person from doing so could be charged with a felony of the third degree, up to a $10,000 fine for each violation, punishable up to 5 years imprisonment. Now, why do we share that information? We do not share that information to scare people, just to inform so that you know that you're required by law to report abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And if you don't, there could be some consequences. This is not for those of you who are professional mandated reporters. This is to encourage those who may try to use the hotline to harass people, right? To belittle people, to give people a hard time. This is to encourage them not to make false reports. Okay, so that's where this is used. This is not used in order to instill fear or anything like that. This is just to encourage people from making false reports. Now, what do we need here at the hotline in order to accept a report? We need a vulnerable adult. We need an alleged perpetrator that meets the criteria for the particular harm or maltreatment. We need them to be located in Florida at the time of the report. We also need a way to locate them, like we mentioned earlier, and an allegation of harm that any reasonable person would suspect that that person is likely to be harmed or is being harmed. So we're going to talk about what are we talking about when we say vulnerable adult? Who is a vulnerable adult? A vulnerable adult must be 18 years of age or older, and their ability to perform their activities of daily living or instrumental activities of daily living or their own protection is impaired due to a disability or dysfunction. Okay, so when we speak about a vulnerable adult, 18 years of age or older, and they have a disability or dysfunction that impairs their ability to care for and or protect themselves. So impairments can include mental impairments, sensory impairments, long-term physical disabilities or dysfunctions, developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, traumatic brain injury, organic brain damage in some instances, okay, and mental and physical limitations associated with aging. So all these include but are not limited to ways that adults could be considered vulnerable. But again, we're talking about something that's long term, right? Something that is chronic, it is expected to continue, not something that is short term and they are expected to recover from. Okay. And there are some situations where adults go in and out of vulnerability. So, for example, with mental health, sometimes people with mental health are fine, right? They're fine. They're being treated. They're on medication. They may be in therapy. They may have a certain treatment plan and they are fine. So they would not be considered a vulnerable adult. But if in that same example, they are off their medication, they're no longer in treatment, they don't think they need it, right? And they are unstable, then that would be considered a vulnerable adult at that time. So a vulnerable adult can go in and out of vulnerability depending on their situation, but there are some situations that are more long term. Now, who can be considered an alleged perpetrator for a vulnerable adult? So when we speak about abuse, and we're going to define exactly what we're talking about when we say abuse, a caregiver, relative, or household member. This can include children in some instances. So not only just adults, but this can also include children. Neglect. For neglect, there has to be an agreement of a caregiver providing frequent and regular care for a person. So, not someone acting out of the kindness of their heart, but where there is either a verbal or written agreement to provide care. Also, vulnerable adults or adults can neglect themselves. So, it can be a situation of self neglect. Exploitation. so in order to exploit a vulnerable adult, and we'll explore that definition in just a moment, a person has to be in a position of trust or confidence with that vulnerable adult. So someone that they trust, they confide in, they trust to handle certain things for them, or a person who knows or should know that that vulnerable adult lacks the capacity to consent. So they do not know what they are agreeing to, declining, and the consequences of that type of decision. Now, what is abuse? When we speak about abuse, when as it relates to vulnerable adults, we're talking specifically about a willful act. So a willful act or a threatened act by a relative caregiver or household member, which causes or is likely to cause impairment to the vulnerable adult's physical, mental, emotional health. So when we speak about a willful act, we're talking about intent, right? Something that was done with intent. Now, the thing about something being willful, you don't have to intend to cause the outcome and it still be considered a willful act. Meaning, for example, if someone hits a vulnerable adult, they may be attempting to redirect them, right? They may not be intending to hurt them or cause an injury, but the willful act was the hit. So that could be considered abuse if it causes or it's likely to cause an injury. So when we speak about likely to cause an injury, we're speaking specifically about things like force, right? What type of force used? Was it excessive? Those kind of things. So when we're talking about abuse, either it likely could cause an injury or it did cause an injury. When we speak about a neglect typically is talking about the failure or omission to provide care, supervision, right? That could be medical care, right? That could be food, clothing, shelter, supervision, right? And which any person would consider necessary for the care of that vulnerable adult. So it's usually a failure or omission on a part of the caregiver to provide that frequent and regular care. Okay, so the failure or omission to provide food, clothing, medicine, shelter, medical care, things like that. And when we speak about exploitation, we specifically are speaking about someone who either uh, takes a vulnerable adult's resources or attempts to take their resources, right? So their funds, their resources, their assets. We have a lot of people that come to the state of Florida with resources to retire. We get numerous reports from banks, right? From attorneys, from powers of attorney, speaking about people who are attempting to take their resources, right? Having them sign something they don't, documents that they don't know what they're signing, and they're signing away their assets, they're signing away their homes, they're signing away all sorts of things. So when we talk about exploitation, the thing to know about that is they don't have to have obtained, that alleged perpetrator doesn't have to have obtained that asset, those funds, that property. All they have to do is endeavor to obtain. So all they have to do is attempt to obtain their property, their benefits, their asset. At the Florida Abuse Hotline, again, our level is reasonable cause to suspect harm. Would a reasonable person suspect that that vulnerable adult is being abused, neglected, or exploited? Now, if we don't have enough to accept a report, then we may refer to other services, right? So we have to have that acceptance criteria that I shared with you earlier in order to accept a report. Now, why may we not be able to accept a report? These are things that we can't tell you when you contact the hotline. We may have already received that information, investigated, and closed it, right? So if we've already received information, we've investigated it, it's been closed, we can't tell you that because when you contact the hotline, right, all that information is confidential. Your information is kept confidential. It's protected by law. Even if you spoke to one of our counselors, you hung up and got that same counselor, they cannot confirm or deny that they've ever spoke to you before, right? We have them take extra precautions to make sure that your identity as a reporter is not revealed. So if we cannot establish that we have enough to accept a report, if we've already reported and investigated, if it's already been called in, if it happened some time ago, someone may have already reported it. So if you're calling in as a reporter, you want to let us know this is an ongoing situation. This is continuing to happen, because that can result in us being able to accept that report. Now, if we're unable to take the report, it may be that that vulnerable adult is not located in Florida at the time of the call. If that's the case, then if they reside in another state, then we may direct you to the equivalent of the Florida Abuse Hotline in another state, so another state reporting hotline. If you're calling to follow up on an investigation that you called in, then you don't call the hotline, you need to contact the local office. Okay. We also make referrals to legal aid for those that need attorneys and someone to act on behalf of them legally. 211 will direct them to local referrals in the area. We do have access to several referrals, but if they want referrals that are specific in their area, we'll have them contact 211. Some things warrant law enforcement. So if the alleged perpetrator is not a relative, caregiver, or household member, or is not someone that the vulnerable trusts, right, in a position of trust or confidence, or knows that or should know that they lack the capacity to consent, if they don't meet any of that criteria, then that would be an area for law enforcement. So if it's a stranger, if it's someone running a scam, right, an internet scam or something like that, we would direct them to law enforcement. There are also other agencies that we can direct them to as well. Okay, the Department of Consumer Services also deals with fraud. Okay, so it just depends on the particular situation. But our area of concern primarily is caregiver abuse. So that's what we're talking about, and that's our area that we primarily cover. We also make several referrals to elder care, specifically in the areas that the vulnerable adult is located in, to see if they can provide services. There are so many different referrals that we have. We have pages and pages of referrals, and we try to give referrals that are helpful for that vulnerable adult. And we make note also for the investigator that we've provided these referrals so that they can follow up on whether or not they've followed and they've called those other agencies for services. How do you make a report? So, how do you make a report to the Florida Abuse Hotline? There are several ways that you can make a report, and we have some newer features to make reporting easier for reporters. So, you can give us a call. We are required by law to be available to the reporting public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We do not close. In emergencies, we do not close. And natural disasters, we do not close. We're required to be here on holidays. We're here all of the time. You can give us a call at 1-800-96-ABUSE, right? Or 962-2873. We have a newer feature where we have callback assist. So if our queues are high, which right now in the summer they are not, but if our queues are high, you can save the order in which your call was received, and you will receive a call back from a hotline counselor. Now, again, they won't confirm or deny that you've contacted the hotline, again, to protect your identity, but they will say, "Thank you for calling the Florida Abuse Hotline. How may I help you?" Right? And start from there. So just know that you can give us a call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can also make a web report. And with that web report, we have a newer feature where you can receive an email from the hotline counselor, get their first name, get their ID number, and whether or not they're going to accept the report for investigation or not. So that's a newer feature. You can get an email back if you check that you would like to be contacted. You provide your name and your email address. We can let you know whether or not the report is going to be accepted, give you the hotline counselor that processed your information, their first name, and their ID number. We also have services for those that are hearing impaired through TDD. They can dial 711 or the toll free number. And then we also can receive services through our fax or reports of abuse or neglect through fax, and it comes through our web portal. Okay, so that's how you can make a report to the hotline. Sometimes people do certain things like call the local office. You do not want to contact the local office because they'll just direct you to call the actual hotline, right? They cannot oftentimes give you information. They cannot accept a report, but they may be able to give you just information if on following up, provided that you gave your name, your contact information. They can give you a call back. They can let you know sometimes on the status of the report, but you definitely do not want to contact the hotline back. Okay, I mean the local office back. You don't want to contact law enforcement unless it's an emergency. Contact law enforcement if that alleged perpetrator or the person of concern is not a relative, caregiver, household member, or someone that the vulnerable adult trusts, or if they lack the capacity to consent, then you definitely want to contact law enforcement. Okay. I look forward to any questions. Thank you for your participation. This is my information here. If you have any additional questions, we will have a question and answer session a little bit later. So I look forward to any questions that you may have. You feel free to contact me here at the hotline. That is my email address. That's the best way to reach me. And then this is my work phone number. Thank you for your time. Thank you for having us. And everyone have a good day.
Nikki, thank you for such great information. We look forward to hearing the questions and answers at the end of the program. And that is a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the program. Our next presenter will be introduced by Janet Dickinson.
Good morning. I'm Janet Dickinson. I'm the Planning and Compliance Manager and also the Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation Coordinator at ElderSource, the Area Agency on Aging of Northeast Florida. I have the pleasure of introducing Keisha Wilkinson. She is the Outreach Coordinator for the Consumer Protection Division at the Florida Attorney General's Office. She travels the state teaching Florida's senior consumers about emerging scams and fraud that target their population. Keisha's goal is to give seniors the tools they need to prevent becoming a victim. She is based in Tallahassee, Florida. Welcome, Keisha.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. Okay. Thank you for joining us for this presentation on scams and fraud against seniors. Now, I'm here today to talk to you about some of the most common types of scams and fraud that seniors see just going about their daily lives. It's everywhere now. And after we're done today, my hope is that you'll be better prepared to pass on information and better prepared to identify one of these scams or fraud when you run across one. Okay, we're on the first slide now. Thank you. All right, next slide. We have to do the legal information. This presentation is for information purposes only, and it should not be construed as providing legal advice or presenting a formal opinion by the Office of the Attorney General. Okay, our mission today. Our mission here at the Office of the Attorney General's Consumer Protection is to protect consumers from fraud and other financial exploitation, to prevent and stop unfair and deceptive business practices, and to accomplish these directives without undermining the competitive process of trade and commerce. In other words, we love businesses to do business in Florida, but not do it fraudulently. Next slide. Okay. So you may be wondering, why seniors? Why would someone target our seniors? Well, we're going to go over a few reasons why they do. First, we're going to talk about abundance. Everyone knows Pop Your Collars, Florida. Florida is the #1 retirement destination in the country. And guess who else knows that?
Oh, no.
Scammers. Scammers are aware that Florida is the #1 retirement destination. Another reason is trust. The AARP did a study, and it showed that more than 1 out of 3 seniors were kind of vulnerable to fraudulent sales schemes because they were just unaware that this was going on, you know? And younger consumers tend to ask more questions. Our seniors come from a time where you could trust people. If someone says this is what they're selling and this is what they're doing, that's what they were selling and doing. But nowadays it's different. You know, you have to be aware of everyone, because not everyone is out to do good for you. Physical or mental impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's, limited mobility, all of these things make seniors especially vulnerable. One moment here. Okay, here we are. Assets. Seniors are more likely to have cash on hand, and scammers know this. They know when to expect when they're getting these monthly Social Security checks, the monthly pension. They're very aware of this. And independence and loneliness is another reason. Do you know scammers will go through and scour the obituary section in a newspaper just to see who's lonely? Because what do the obituary section tells you? It tells you that Bob Lee, you know, was married to his wife for more than 50 years and now he suddenly died. A scammer takes that information, and in that scammer's mind, that means there's a woman at home whose husband most likely took care of most of the things, you know, like yard or contractor work. And so they will go and try to prey upon that person because they're lonely. And embarrassment is another reason. Seniors are often too embarrassed to ask questions, confront a scammer, or even admit that they've been scammed. But remember, if you don't report it, you allow that scammer to do the same thing to another senior. So always report, and I'll give you some ways to report at the end of this presentation. Okay, so the Consumer Sentinel Network, they compile information about scams. It's part of the FTC, and they compile information about scams nationwide. This, as you see, shows that there were 2.6 million fraud reports last year. That's fraud. There were a total of 5.4 million reports. The 2.6 is just the fraud reports. So it's happening in our country big time. Next slide, please. Now, remember when I said that mobility and dementia and things like that, you know, create scammers to go after seniors? Well, this slide here shows that younger people, they reported losing money to fraud more often, but when people age 70 plus had a loss, it was higher, much higher than the younger people's fraud. As you see from this, it's $1,450 compared to at age 20, they lost about $480. Next slide, please. Okay, these two lists here show you the top consumer complaints in Florida. Okay, so last year, #1, builder and contractor. Now, builder and contractor complaints were the top complaints, and these type of complaints range from firms that can take consumers' money for services that are never provided to firms that advertise cheap services and then try to upsell for a new system. Oh, I can do that for you for $50, and then they get there to do the work. Now suddenly it's $250. So consider the following when you hire a contractor to perform a home repair or remodel. Get multiple estimates, more than one. There are lots of contractors out there. Do your due diligence and shop around for the right one. Get at least 3. Research that company thoroughly before you sign that contract or provide any money. No deposits if you haven't researched the company. Verify that this contractor is licensed and insured. Read and understand the contract. Okay? Now, our next complaint are auto-related complaints. Now, these are anywhere from those repairs, you know, the repair insurance that says you have an older car and it's going to break down. Get this repair insurance. And whenever your car breaks down, we'll cover everything. Sometimes they do not. So we got a lot of those complaints. And it also includes other extended warranty products. And they don't really provide the service that they're claiming that they'll provide. Timeshare. I know all of you know what timeshares are. Well, timeshare was our number 3. And with timeshares, those complaints are a double whammy because fraud happens at the time they purchase it and then when they try to sell the timeshare back. So you have to read your contract, determine what cancellation rights you have. And remember, you do not have to be forced to buy anything right away. If someone's trying to make you sign a contract right away, oh, don't talk to your lawyer. Red flag. You know, you should be able to take your time and make an informed decision before you purchase anything. So always remember that. And what happens on the resale end is that the victims of timeshare sales companies are contacted either over the phone or they're mailed a postcard telling the victim, hey, call this toll-free number. We found a buyer for your timeshare. So you're like, yes, a buyer. I'm getting rid of this thing. So they'll tell you, all we need you to do is just send us $100, $150 just to cover the cost of the paperwork. And people send that money in and then they never sell their timeshare and they still have it. So please be careful of those. Now, imposter scams, we're going to go through some of those after this slide, but that's anytime someone is pretending to be someone they're not in order to get your personal information. Okay, that's what an imposter scam is. And last, we have internet-related transactions. And those are complaints related to negative option sales. We're going to go over those too, but basically, that's when you purchase one item and then you're really purchasing a subscription. But you didn't sign up for a subscription. You just signed up for that one item. So those are called negative option sales, but we're going to go over those in a moment. Next slide, please. So where do scams happen? Truth is, they happen just about everywhere. They can happen in the mail, at your door, on the phone, online, and then a mixture of all of them. In the mail, they come through letters that appear to be legitimate, but may in fact only be an advertisement that's disguised as an official letter. And what they're trying to do is lure you into contacting their company and provide sensitive information or make a purchase. Scams even show up at your front door with pushy salesmen promising you goods and services at a price that's too good to be true. Scams come through your phone and even on text messages now. They send them through your text messaging and phone calls. And you can find them online when even checking your email. They come through your email as well. So we're going to go over these in the next few slides. Next slide, please. All right, scams in the mail. You won a sweepstakes. You won the grand prize in an international lottery. Your free trip awaits. Claim it today. And the favorite, your warranty is about to expire. I know you guys have gotten some of those calls. So sweepstakes are the most common mail-based scams. And it's important to remember that legitimate sweepstakes don't require you to pay anything upfront to receive the prize they claim you won. Now, if you're told that you got to pay pre-taxes, you're probably being scammed. Because taxes can either be withheld from a cash award or more commonly are reported by the company to the IRS and you declare that prize as part of your annual tax return. Also, know that participating in a foreign lottery is against federal laws. Now, one way you can reduce junk mail is by registering your address with the Direct Marketing Association's Mail Preference Service, DMA Choice. You can register online, or you can send in a form, and they charge you $5, but it's for a 10-year registration period. It won't get rid of every piece of junk mail, but it will reduce it greatly, okay? And you can send your name and your address to DMA Choice, P.O. Box 900, Cos Cobb, Connecticut, 06807. DMA Choice, P.O. Box 900, Cob, two different words, Connecticut, 06807. It's worth it, okay? Okay. These next two slides, well, this one slide shows you an example of actual deceptive mail sent to consumers. Now, if you look at them, they look real. These deceptive ads will have official seals. They are going to have deadlines, ask you to indicate what time you're available to receive your check. And they may even have a local address. Remember, just because something looks official doesn't mean it's real. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. If you don't remember entering a contest or have any doubts about the notice you receive, consider not responding at all until you've had a chance to look into that company. Next slide, please. Scams at your door. Crooked salespeople will come to your house and make the most outrageous claims to get you to purchase something. Now, the most common things that they're going door to door selling are water filtration systems, carpet cleaning services, window installation, security or medical alert systems, and AC installation and duct cleaning. Okay. Now, if it's a product that you really are interested in purchasing, consider these tips. Just beware of high pressured sales tactics. Take the time to do the research on the company. Do not allow these pushy salesmen inside your home, okay? Do not sign anything. A lot of these salesmen, what they're doing now is, a tablet. So they're traveling with a tablet, and you'll say, no, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. And they'll say, okay, well, can you sign this tablet right here, just stating that you don't want to purchase it? Don't sign it, because what they're doing is capturing your signature. So don't sign anything. If you don't want to buy something, you don't have to sign something saying you don't want to buy it. Just don't buy it, okay? And now, if it is something you may be interested in, there is a rule that helps protect consumers called the cooling off period for door-to-door sales. All home solicitation contracts must be in writing and include the statement of the buyer's right to cancel, okay? You have the right to cancel a home solicitation sale until midnight of the third business day after the day on which the buyer signs an agreement or offer to purchase. That is your cooling off rule. What you have to do is make that request in writing and use a return receipt. But that seller must return any down payment within 10 days of that cancellation notice. And that buyer can keep those goods until they send you your money back, okay? That is an FTC regulation rule, cooling off period for door-to-door sales. Remember that. Next slide, please. Okay, take a look at this slide. This slide says this company has a water update and an electric update. So you're like, whoa. But if you read at the very bottom of these notices, it says that this company is not affiliated with a public or private utility company. So if you're not affiliated with a private or a public utility company, what update could you possibly have? They don't. They want you to call and provide sensitive information. Don't do it. If you think that there is a concern with your water or your utilities, find your phone bill, find your water bill, call the number on those bills, not something that was stuck in your door. And remember, a red flag is always when they ask you to pay for your outstanding balance with a gift card, a Green Dot card, a Walmart to Walmart, a prepaid debit card, or cryptocurrency. Those are not the ways that you pay your utility bills. So that's a red flag if they ask for that. Next slide, please. All right. So I know many of you have caller ID on your phones. That's common now, right? Where it shows the number, the name of the person calling you. Okay, cool. But did you know that caller ID information can be what we call spoofed? Yes, spoofed. What this means is that the number or person that's listed on your caller ID may not be the person that's actually calling you. Scammers can make it look like they're calling from a local area code, but they can be calling from anywhere in the world. And it's important that before you provide personal information or payment, that you're talking to who you think you're talking to. If you think you're talking to a credit card company and they say they're a credit card company, say, let me call you back. Because when you call them back, you're going to actually reach the credit card company and not the scammer. Because while they can make it look like they're calling from that number, they're not at that number. So if you do call them back, then it's going to be calling the actual company and not them. Now, some of these numbers that are most commonly spoofed are IRS, sometimes your local offices, Social Security, that's another big one. And they can just put in those numbers and make it look like they're calling from any company. So you must be careful. Okay. So next we're going to talk about another scam that's emerging, but it's emerging with a whole different scheme, and it's the grandparent scam. You may have heard of it. Someone calls, pretends to be the grandchild, asks grandma to send them some money, grandma sends them money. But it's taken a whole new level now. You guys heard of AI, artificial intelligence is everywhere, right? So what they're doing, they can use a voice. You know how everyone wants to upload videos on Facebook? Look, I'm eating at a restaurant. Look at my food, or I'm here. Well, when they put that voice out, scammers can use that voice. And with just a few sentences, they can make it mimic the computer system they have, make it mimic that voice. It happened to a grandmother in Fort Pierce. She received a phone call from her grandson, right? She looked at the caller ID. Caller ID said it was the grandson. The voice sounded just like the grandson. So it's a grandson, right? You're hearing the voice, you're seeing the number on caller ID. He asked grandma for some money, told grandma not to call his parents, said he was out of the state, he had hit a pregnant woman, and he was in trouble. Then he put another guy on the phone that was a fake cop. Fake cop says, I need $5,000 cash, ma'am, and we can avoid your grandson going to jail. Grandma went to that bank, got that $5,000 out. This scammer sent a person to her house. She had a ring camera. So you could see her giving the box to the person, but the person's face wasn't in the ring camera, right? Next day, grandson calls again. This time he tells grandma, oh, grandma, the pregnant woman, her baby died. So now they're upping my charges to murder. Grandma was distraught. Fake cop gets on the phone. Grandma, we need $10,000 cash. Your grandson won't go to jail. Grandma went back to that bank. Grandma took out $10,000 in cash and gave it to the scammer. The next day, day 3, guess who actually calls grandma? The grandson. Grandma said, I'm so happy. Everything worked out. You got the money and you're not in jail. He's like, what are you talking about, grandma? What do you mean? You called me yesterday for money to bond you out and the day before. He's like, grandma, I've never left the state. I'm still here. So she was out of that money and there's nothing anyone can do because she has no names, not even a picture of the person that took the money. So that's the new grandparent scam. And they're using AI to generate all types of fake voices. So you have to be careful because you can't really even trust the voice you hear on the phone. So the key to all of it, if your grandkids call you asking for money, don't tell them Keisha said not to give it to them. Tell them you'll call them back. Because when you call your grandchild back, you're going to actually reach the grandchild and not the spoofed fake number and the fake person that's pretending to be your grandchild. Now, here are some other very popular imposter scams. IRS, saying that you owe taxes, warrant out for your arrest. Jury duty, that's gained some popularity, where they're calling and saying that you've missed jury duty, so we have a warrant out for your arrest. Notice all of these put fear. They use fear to try to, as a tactic, to try to get you to pay fast without thinking. Okay. Utility, oh, they love to call and say they're about to cut off your lights. Now, we all live in Florida and we know how hot it is. I just left Port St. Lucie yesterday. Ooh, it was steaming hot. So imagine the light place calling saying they're gonna cut off your lights because you left a $100 balance. Without thinking, you may just pay it. Don't do that. Always, always call the number on your light bill. Okay, charity solicitors. We're going to talk about tech support in a second, and debt collectors. Those are all common phone scams, so be very careful. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to talk about scams online. Now, you ever heard of phishing? Not phishing with an F, phishing with a PH. These two pictures you're looking at are example of phishing scams, where they just send all these random emails hoping that you'll click on one, believe it's the company, and give them your information. Now that IRS one, it looks legit. It's not. IRS won't send you an email. They don't call you. They always send paper mail through the mail, okay? And what they have in there is, if you can see that underlined link in that IRS email, that's called a hyperlink. Hyperlinks are links that take you to a whole nother different site. But if you hover your mouse over the hyperlink, it will tell you exactly which site it'll take you to. So just be very careful when clicking on these links because they can lead to viruses. And look at that Amazon email. It looks legitimate, but here are some telltale signs. It says, "Dear client." Amazon knows your name. So they're going to say, "Dear Keisha." I know because they email me. And then again, look at that hyperlink. It's going to some other site that's not Amazon. And even look at the address that sent you the email. That Amazon address looks almost legit if you glance at it, but it's missing the A. It's to Amazon. So again, they use these tactics. And when you're rushing sometimes and not paying attention is when you fall for these tactics. So be very, very careful. Now, negative option sales. Negative option billing refers to a business practice where a customer agrees to have goods or services be provided automatically. And that customer must either pay for the service or specifically decline it in advance of getting billed. For example, say you try a new skincare product, right? Or you enrolled for a free trial of the skincare product. By making that initial order for that single item, some online retailers may automatically enroll you for future or reoccurring purchases that you never wanted. So you need to make sure you know if your trial period starts the day you place the order or the day you receive the product, okay? Make sure you know how to cancel and when you must cancel these free trials in order to avoid being charged. And make sure you understand what the recurring monthly fee will be and whether shipping and handling is included. Read the fine print, okay? Read the fine print. Next slide, please. Okay, now tech support scams, they happen over the phone and online. Over the phone, they'll call you saying, "Yes, I'm Bob with tech support. It looks like your computer's infected with a virus or malware." And you'll say, "Oh my goodness, this is terrible." Or they'll send you an email, right? What they want to do is They want to tap into your computer. Yes, you can click a link and give them permission to go onto your computer to quote unquote fix it, right? Then they'll show you a screen just like this once they have access to your computer, right? This screen says warning, warning, error, error. You think your computer's about to blow up, but it's not. What they want to do is scare you into believing something is wrong with your computer. You may even get a pop-up. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide. You may get a pop-up. Next slide. There it is. This pop-up is an actual pop-up notifying you to call or activate your virus protection. It's all fake. And if you do get this pop-up, I want you to hit Control-Alt-Delete at the same time. Use your task manager to close down that program. Control-Alt-Delete. They want you to click on something, which will just take you down a rabbit hole of more pop-ups. Don't do it. Shut your computer down or use Control-Alt-Delete to end that task. Next slide. Now, someone actually bought the virus protection, the fake one, and this is the screen showing his payment. It's all fake. It looks legit, but it's not legit. Okay. If someone tells you that their company is affiliated or associated with Microsoft, Apple, cable companies, call them directly and verify. Call the number if you have a Microsoft system and this person is calling you and saying that they're with Microsoft, say, let me call you back. That number there is a scammer's number that's just trying to get more of your sensitive information. Next slide, please. All right, savvy consumers. Some tips. 3 important words, just hang up. Hang up that phone if you don't know who it is. If you don't recognize that number, just hang it up. Don't bother, because anyone that's important, they will leave you a message, okay? If you feel pressure to sign a contract or make a purchase, ask for more time. Buying something shouldn't be pressure. It should be a great experience, right? You're buying something you want, so it should not be pressure involved in that. Sign up for those national do not call lists and the Florida do not call list, do not call.gov. Okay. And if you get a cold call, just hang up on them. I know you might think it's rude. It's okay. They'll be okay. Review your bills and statements for unauthorized charges. There was a scam story I read. This man had 1 million bank accounts and every month he took $1. $1 a month, 1 million bank accounts. That's all it takes for a scammer. But he had access to 1 million accounts, okay? And opt out of pre-screened or pre-approved credit card offers. Next slide. Okay, now when you're ordering online, see that padlock? That padlock is important. If it's not in the address bar, that means that your connection is not secure. Now, while you're browsing for an item, it may not be a padlock. But when you go to enter your sensitive information, your name, your address, your credit card information, telephone number, that padlock should be there, okay? If it's not there, get off that site. Read your contracts in full before you sign them and understand the rights of cancellation. Shred and burn those documents. There are still people that go through trash. And now it's a bit easier because we all separate the paper from the banana peels. So people are still going through your mail and getting your sensitive information. So burn or shred those documents. Check your credit report regularly. Some seniors find it just easier to just freeze their credit. That way they don't have to worry about it because you can always unfreeze it easily, okay? And know that if something is too good to be true, it is. Next slide, please. Do not share your information unless you must do it. Stop carrying that Social Security card in those wallets. Leave them home in a fireproof lockbox, okay? And passwords online. Use a password management system. What is that, Keisha? Google has them. Sometimes when you can go to set up a new account, it'll say, would you like me to recommend a password? Tell it yes. because it's going to recommend a very, very complicated password, and it's going to remember that password so you don't have to. And never include personal or financial information through an email. Just don't do it. Don't respond to unsolicited emails. Mark them as spam and delete them out of your box. Okay, next slide, please. Need to file a complaint? Here is your number to file a complaint. 1-866-9-NO-SCAM or 1-866-966-7226, or you can go to myfloridalegal.com. And other resources for you: Federal Trade Commission, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, Florida Department of Elder Affairs, woo woo, and Florida Elder Abuse Hotline, and Seniors versus Crime. If you go to myfloridalegal.com, we have a page there that has lots of resources, a senior guide, hurricane guide, lots of free brochures and information. And if you ever need some, I can send you copies. And that concludes my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it and you learned something from it.
Thank you, Keisha. It was a great information, a lot of good resources. And I noted in the chat that I had a window salesman come to my home the other day, and he left very quickly when I asked for a business card.
That's right. Good.
And so it was very relevant to me as well. So we are going to ask Nikki to come off mute as well, and Gabrielle and Andrea from our Jacksonville area will be coming off mute and asking questions. So we will encourage you to continue to put questions in the chat box. We have plenty of time for questions, so please feel free to do so. We do have a few. So I am going to let Andrea and Gabrielle take over this, and Nikki and Keisha, thank you again, and we look forward to hearing the answers to these questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Spencer, and I'm Vice President of Communications here at ElderSource. And we had the pleasure of having Keisha at an in-person event last year, so we knew that she was going to be an excellent speaker. So both of them this morning have been outstanding. So please put your questions in the chat. I have a few queued up for each of you, and let's start with one area that you didn't touch on, Keisha. And I know that we had a conversation about this not too long ago. Romance scams. You told me about that situation at the airport, an event down at the airport in Daytona. So can you touch about what that is, how it works, and what people can do to protect themselves?
Well, remember earlier I was saying how seniors are more apt to fall prey to some of these scams because of loneliness. And so romance scams are basically based on loneliness. A lot of them reach out to these seniors via Facebook. They'll start a conversation, just a simple hi. And they may have months of conversation before they ask for someone, because they are literally luring this person in, gaining their trust, telling them things they want to hear. You know, if it's a man, an older man, saying the things he might want to hear about how handsome he looks, or if it's a woman, how beautiful she looks. And, you know, they really, really form this bond before they ask, and then they'll start asking for money. The money requests will start. And there are also romance scams. There are some companies that will start online or a dating website or a dating company, and they fall prey to that as well. So if you have seniors that you know are by themselves, that you know are lonely, call your friends up, say hi to them. Make sure that they're not falling prey to someone like that. If you have a friend that's talking about a man she met and he's all of this and that, but you know that she doesn't leave the house, ask her more questions. You know, it just takes us looking out for each other to help those lonely friends out.
Those are great. I had heard some other tips that if you get an email and you start some correspondence, if their English is not as grammatically proper, then
Right.
you know it might be a foreigner. If they're only
That's
contacting
true.
you, responding to you like in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, they could be in a completely different time zone. So those are some of the red flags that
Yes.
people can look out for. And there's a lot of other good information out there about romance scams. Have you ever heard of you get a text that says, "Hi, how you doing today?" And you don't know who it's from, and then they start engaging you that way through your own cell phone. Is that something that you've encountered with people telling you about?
Yes, yes. The cell phone scams are getting very popular. Um, they especially like to pretend that they're the United States Postal Service. Oh, they love to pretend that your package or UPS or Amazon. And so you have to be very, very careful not to click on those links. Those links will take you down a rabbit hole. I'm going to put in the chat um, a link to our senior guide. Our senior guide touches on a lot of the scams. There's so many of them. Of course, I couldn't discuss them all in one meeting, but the romance scams, reverse mortgages, there's so many smaller scams, but please, I put it in the chat, the link to our senior guide. It's an online version, but if you need copies of this guide, I can mail them to you. Okay, every guide that you guys are seeing on the links that I'm posting, I can mail you copies of any of the guides, any of the brochures, so that you can pass them on to your seniors. So please, please, utilize that, and it's for free. And there's another one I didn't mention that's in this brochure. It's called Seniors versus Crimes. It's a free service, and it's so helpful to seniors. They serve as a liaison between a contractor or a company and that senior. I had one here recently in Tallahassee. She had some shelves put up, but all the shelves were leaning to the side. Contractor would never call her back. She contacted Seniors versus Crimes. They contacted the contractor came out, and this is a free service, free service. So please utilize these free services for your seniors in your area.
So all the resources that we're mentioning today will be in that follow-up email, the links to all these terrific sites. We do have a question. Somebody had asked, I don't know how Hope Florida is involved with elder abuse prevention, and I don't think that they are. So Hope Florida is a program through the Florida Department of Elder Affairs where people can volunteer in their communities. So and I don't think that there's a connection on how Hope Florida works with abuse situations. So thank you for that question. Another question that we had is our local society, it's not helping a reportable instance, such as a person abusing, the situation is abusive. And I think they're talking about homelessness. So I wonder if that person has asked that question, if you can put a little bit of clarifying information in the chat, we'll try to answer it. But I think you may be asking about homelessness as it relates to self-neglect. I'm not quite sure, but if you can put that little bit of information in the chat, that would be great. There is, I'm gonna go through the chat now. We've got some really good questions in here. How are perpetrators of elder crimes held accountable, punished, and have you had success in recovering losses for the victims? That would be for our other speaker. And if you could pipe in and let us know what is being done to help hold these individuals accountable for the abuse.
Okay. So the Florida Abuse Hotline and the Child Protective Investigators come from a social services angle. So their primary concern is protecting the adults, right? And putting services in place so that they have what they need and they're not being put into a situation where they can be taken advantage of. The legal side of it, like how they're punished, falls under law enforcement. So if they have committed a crime, and many of these things are crimes, right? They're crimes. They're taking advantage of them. They're taking their resources, their assets. Then they can be charged by law enforcement. So we work hand in hand. And a lot of our professional mandated reporters are, in fact, law enforcement. They've been called out to the home, they've been called out to the facility, they've been made aware of a situation. So people can be handled with in different areas, the social services side to make sure that they have everything that they need and they're safe, which is our primary concern, and then from the law enforcement or legal aspect of it where they can be charged.
Thank you. This is a tough question. I'm not even sure that there might be an answer. It says, why can't the government stop these scams? Threatening to cut off their aid. So sounds like a complicated question and with a complicated answer.
Yes, the FBI did a report, and I think it was 98%, maybe 99, but 98% at least of these phone calls you're getting are from India. They're from other countries, and there's just unfortunately not a lot that can be done with phone calls. Because sometimes you can block them. Cell phones nowadays are really good at letting you know that it is a scam call that's calling. Sometimes you can block the number, but they're using computer systems, right? So it auto-populates a different number that fast. So you just really have to rely on yourself and your own phone systems to try and block some of these numbers. I report every time I get one, I do block it. And every time I get an email, I mark it as a spam if it is a spam, But there is not a lot that we can do. We just have to be vigilant about the phone calls we take.
Right. Thank you. Here's a good question from our friends at the Green Cove Springs Senior Center. Thanks for joining us today. Passwords can sometimes be many and complex. Are there any tips to keeping them secure?
Yes, use a password management system. On my Apple phone, I don't know any of my passwords. They're all stored in my phone. And online, I use Google, and Google has one as well. Most systems, most phones, most of them have password management systems. So I would use the password manager to create one that is a little bit more complex. And that way they can remember it for you, instead of you trying to remember all of these different passwords. And they'll even recommend it if your password has been used in some type of a breach. Apple told me that my password was used in a breach and that I needed to change it. So I did,
Wow.
so yes. So definitely use your password management systems, and do not call .gov. Do not call .gov is where you go to register for these calls. It's not going to stop every call, but it will at least stop some of them. And if you tell them that you're on the do not call list, they'll hang up really fast.
Great, thank you. Somebody had asked a question about getting a scam on their personal cell phone about medications. So, and I'm not sure, it says, I keep getting a lot of these calls lately asking if I'm taking any medications. I told them I'm recording this call and they hung up on me. It appears to be a new scam. So it's maybe, and I'm wondering if this is connected to the rampant Medicare fraud abuse that's going on right now. Your area agencies on aging have a department called SHINE, Serving the Health Insurance Needs of Elders, SHINE, and which helps you with, it's free and unbiased counseling about your Medicare benefits. You turn 65, it gets confusing about how to sign up for Medicare, open enrollment. You want to get some advice that where the person's not trying to sell you anything. So you go through the SHINE program. It's your area agency on aging, but they also have a subdivision called Senior Medicare Patrol. And those individuals help you recognize and uncover that if you are experiencing Medicare fraud, such as the mailing of the braces, the knee braces, the elbow braces, the swabbing for a DNA, check. You know, all those kinds of things can be reported to the Senior Medicare Patrol, and then they in turn report it to the Office for Inspector General. So we're not investigative agencies. We send that up to the state, and they start collecting information about various Medicare scams and frauds. So if this is a Medicare medical kind of experience that you're having, I would highly recommend that you go to floridashine.gov, I believe it is. So we'll send that link to you in the reporting chat. Someone had said blocking doesn't work. They just call from a different number. I think that's what you had said, Keisha, a few minutes ago. I see in the chat there's information about Hope, Florida. Yeah, diabetic. Somebody said they just got a call this morning from a diabetic clinic. They're checking on medication for diabetes. Again, that they may be looking for your Medicare number. So that is very, very scary. And again, that's identity theft. So you want to keep all of that, secure. And as Keisha had mentioned, don't put your Social Security card in your wallet or your Medicare card, any of that information. You drop it in a parking lot and all of a sudden you become, vulnerable with that. So thanks. I see Patricia put in the Shine, floridashine.org. So someone here in Green Cove again said, what questions are best to ask someone who you suspect is being abused to find out if they actually are being abused or taken advantage of? And then what are some resources to assist? Nikki, I think this one's for you.
Absolutely. So the questions are going to depend on the situation, of course. Um, Basically, you want to ask what happened. If you have a concern, what's going on? What happened? Make sure that they feel safe in sharing. They're not in front of other people. Oftentimes, if you do have that connection with them, they will be more likely to share if other people are not around. You can just simply ask what happened or tell them that you have a concern. Is there anything that they would like you to share? If you see an injury, again, what happened? You want to take note of that injury, what it looks like, see if it is reasonable, right, that they sustained that injury. Does it add up to the explanation? If they deny it, but you do have concerns that the injury does not equal or add up to the explanation, you can still call it in, right? Because people who call the hotline don't necessarily know that a person has been abused, neglected, or exploited. They just suspect or they have a concern, right? It doesn't mean that a person is being abused, neglected, or exploited. It just means that someone had a genuine concern about that person or those people, and they wanted someone to take a closer look.
Thank you, Nikki. I think this kind of goes into a question that Laura put in the chat. And Laura says, who do you call if an elder hits the caregiver?
Right. So you can give us a call we received several calls regarding that as well. So if there are concerns that the caregiver is no longer able to care for the person, maybe their behavior, has escalated, they've become combative. That is something that commonly happens with seniors with some diagnoses. So if that is a concern, you can still call the Florida Abuse Hotline. We have several resources that can support that caregiver. We can make a determination if that is that a standalone situation or is that something that's ongoing and escalating. We can provide several resources. Also, I wanted to speak to Hope Florida. We work hand in hand with Hope Florida. There are Hope Florida navigators that we refer our callers directly to. We can connect you directly to Hope Florida and the Hope Florida navigators during normal business hours. If not, what we do is we send the information into a portal, and then they will give a call back. They work directly with families. They work directly with caregivers to make sure that they are connected with resources. So they don't just give them referrals. At this point now, I think over 93,000 people have been referred to Hope Florida. And many of them have received services because they're actually going hand in hand and making sure that they get the support and resources that they need.
Thank you, Nikki.
Sure.
We just got another good question from Joanne. She says, what about elders that are homeless and seem to not be able to appropriately care for themselves? Are there any resources for them?
I can take that question. And Keisha, if you'd like to add on, you most certainly can. Homelessness in and of itself does not constitute abuse or neglect in the state of Florida. Um, and that's for several reasons. We know that elders have self-determination, right? They get to make choices about the way they live, how they live, so forth and so on. That being said, if you have a concern that an elder is not able to care for themselves, you want to give us a call at the hotline. We get calls on that quite often. We're going to assess whether or not they are neglecting themselves. You know, do they have the capacity to consent, right? Do they know what they're agreeing to and being homeless? Do they understand any consequences? Are there things that they need that are beyond their reach? Because again, our main focus is to make sure that they're safe, that they're cared for, that they have what they need, right? The biggest challenge that we may have with assistance is knowing where they are at the time that the investigator gets the report, right? So can they be somewhere specifically at a, do they go somewhere? Do they hang out in a particular place? Because then you'll have the investigator trying to find a way to locate them, right? And they may or may not be there. So that's our largest challenge when assisting those who are homeless, is just making sure that we can make contact with them. Because if we're going to send an investigator out, we want to make sure that they get contact, and then most importantly, that that person gets the care that they need. So while homelessness does not automatically constitute neglect, it certainly can put a person in an endangered, right, situation. They can be more likely to be abused and neglected. So if you have a concern, just give us a call at 1-800-96-ABUSE or 962-2873, and we will see if we can get them some assistance, especially if they have places that they frequent. Or sometimes they have cell phones too. So if we have a way that we can locate them, that can be helpful as well.
Those are great information. Gabby, did you have another question to ask?
In the chat, Bonita says, can you place the number to report a scam? Oh, Keisha, you just answered it. Cher says, is Baker Act on the agenda for future trainings, but I'm not sure what training she's referring to. But I do want to go back to the seniors versus crimes that you had mentioned. How can someone find a local office, ladies?
I put in the chat a link to our senior guide. Does everyone see that link to the senior guide? In the back of that senior guide is a page that has everything about seniors versus crimes, the local offices, and the number to call.
Great. And we'll send those out again. And thank you, Leslie, for the Florida Abuse Hotline number that's in the chat, and other information in there. So if you're not capturing them now, please be aware of an email that'll come back to you with the actual presentation, as well as the links and the phone numbers. We just have a couple more minutes. Anybody else have any questions, or did I miss any? Okay, any final words from our presenters today? You were great. Thank you so much, Nikki and Keisha.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you for having us so much. This is such an important conversation to have, an important topic, and I really learned something today. So I really appreciate you having us, and thank everyone for their time and their participation and assistance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. And if you guys ever need me, I do these presentations all over the state of Florida. That's what I do. So I put my information in the chat. Let me know what you guys need, and I'm here for you.
Thank you, Keisha, and thank you, Nikki, and thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate so much the opportunity to provide this information. And look out for the email that will come with the link to the recording, as well as the other links that were shared in the chat. You will have noticed that there's a lot of purple today. And we want to encourage you to wear purple on June 15th, which is Saturday, which is the official World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Purple is the color of dignity and respect, and we believe that that's how older adults should be treated. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.